Many alien abduction stories go unnoticed. People tend to weigh them off as people being crazy, hallucinating, and wanting attention. There's so many abduction cases reported that sometimes it's hard to believe if they're actually real or not. However, there are a few that sound a bit too real to just be a work of fiction. Today, we'll be talking about the Pascagoula Abduction, where two men claimed they were abducted by aliens in Mississippi, and in a turn of events, the police actually believed them. Before I begin, I just want to say if you're new here and enjoy my content, join the Cryptic Army and hit that subscribe button. Most of my audience isn't subscribed to me. Let's change that. And with that being said, our story takes place in 1973. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were out fishing on a regular sunny day. As Charles was getting ready to get more bait, he started to hear a zipping sound near him. He looked up and saw a blue flashing light hovering above him. Both men described the object as 30 feet in length and about 10 feet in height. It was shaped like a football. This would be the apparent UFO they claimed to see. The UFO landed around 35 yards behind them. Charles and Calvin moved close to it to investigate. Suddenly, a door opened and a bright white light streamed out. Seconds later, 3 5-foot-tall figures glided out the craft and floated towards the two frightened fishermen. It was clear to Charles and Calvin that these creatures were not human. The odd beings were gray-colored with wrinkled bodies, had lobster-like claws, no neck as the head seemed to connect directly to the shoulders, and something pointy coming out of the head where the nose and ears should be, and directly under the nose was a slit resembling a mouth. The creatures were so wrinkly that the men couldn't tell if they had eyes, and the creature's legs were together and feet resembled that of an elephant's. Both men's first impression was that the creatures were robots. I don't blame them, as when you think of an alien, the common gray alien image is the first thing that comes to mind. When the creatures began approaching Charles and Calvin, Calvin fainted, and two of the creatures grabbed Charles by the arm, and he instantly felt like he was paralyzed. In his words, they glided him into the aircraft. The third creature went and grabbed Calvin and brought him in as well. When the men were all inside the UFO, Charles states that they were all moving as if they were floating together, and he just didn't have the urge to resist. Eventually, both men were brought to what looked like a type of medical room. The creatures were using a language neither of the men could understand. The aliens then used some sort of device on the two men. Charles believes that it was for a medical examination. However, he describes it as looking like a big eye with an attachment to it that went all over his body, and then the creatures had left him, taking Calvin with them. Charles called out for Calvin, but got no response. Moments later, the creatures returned and grabbed him, floating him back to the first room and then outside the craft. Calvin was also there, shaking with fear. The creatures returned to the craft and took off. As they left, Charles received a message through telepathy from the aliens, and that message was, "We come in peace, we mean you no harm." Charles' initial plan was to not tell anyone about this and told Calvin to stay quiet because no one would believe them. One interesting fact is that Charles had fought in the Korean War and knew what intense fear was like. However, this experience was much more scarier for him. That strong fear and anxiety broke him as both men traveled to the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office to report what had happened to them. The two frightened fishermen ended up in an interrogation room where they were questioned by investigators who at first initially thought the men were drunk. They obviously didn't believe the story, so they tried a few interrogation tactics to see if they can catch the men in a lie. However, when they were questioned separately, both of their stories matched up. They even took a polygraph test and passed. When Charles and Calvin were left in the interrogation room alone, The police hid a recording device to record the conversation of the fishermen when they were not present, seeing if they would say anything in private that proves this whole thing was just a hoax, but instead, they were still talking about what had happened to them. Calvin even broke down into tears when talking to Charles about it. It started to become hard for the police to not believe them. Jackson County Sheriff's Captain Glenn Ryder told the Post in 1975, "If they were lying to me, they should have been in Hollywood." The incident quickly became national news. Unfortunately, Charles passed away in September of 2011 at the age of 80, and Calvin has gone into hiding for many years. However, he did publish 2 books since the incident. And in 2019, the river that the incident took place on now has a historical marker to commemorate Calvin and Charles' story. 45 years after the incident, a woman by the name of Maria Blair came out and said that she witnessed the alien abduction when it had happened. On that same night, Maria was waiting for her husband to leave on a boat to work offshore. While waiting, she saw a blue UFO in the sky, but thought it was a plane or helicopter at first. She watched the moving object in the sky for 30 minutes until it went out of sight. When the UFO went out of sight, she heard a loud splash in the water and looked in the water and felt like there was something in it. She didn't think much of it until she heard of Charles and Calvin's story the next day. "I was watching 2 men be abducted," she says. She says she always wanted to talk to the 2 men to let them know that she believes them and witnessed it herself. She never came forward before because she felt like people would just write her off as crazy. She's coming forward now to give the story validation. Maria met Calvin face to face for the first time at the same spot on the Pascagoula River where the alleged abduction occurred, and it didn't take long for the conversation to spark over what happened that strange night. What do you guys think? Did the alleged abduction actually take place, or was it all just a hoax to gather the attention of the media? Let me know in the comments below.